In this episode, I'm going to talk about harvesting, curing, and storing onions. Here we are in the garden, and behind me is our row of onions. In this row we have three different varieties. We have yellow Stuttgarter, white snowball, and on the far end, the red barons. Now these have all been in the ground since mid-April, and these three varieties are all long day varieties. So as the day lengthens here in our zone, these are the perfect variety. And all three of these varieties are good for longer storage. So far, they've all been pretty successful. We've only had 2 or 3 of the red barons that didn't get to maturity, and we removed those early on. Let's get down here close, and I'll show you the signs to look for when it's time to harvest your onion, and a practice that I use to help get a bigger onion bulb. The tops, or the greens, are the best indicator of when it's time to harvest your onion. And there's a lot of different schools of thought towards this. Some say whenever the top 2/3 or half is starting to sag over, then that's time to pull them and move them to the drying racks. As you can see, mine are quite withered, and I have found this practice to be successful. I let mine stay in the ground until all of the greens have started to sag, and the neck right at the top of the bulb is starting to thin out. I would say that if your soil doesn't drain well, then this practice of leaving them in the ground probably isn't best for you. It'll promote rot and mildew and things like that. But we have great draining soil right here. We use the drip irrigation, and it doesn't stay wet. And I've stopped watering for the last few days. Ours have been ready to pull for probably about the last week, but I've been waiting for a great day to get out here and pull them where I can record and share it with you. Yesterday it was over 100 degrees, so we didn't want to get out and pull our onions in the sun. So today, a little bit cooler, we're out here in the morning, and so we're going to get these guys out of the ground. So we've already indicated that it's time to get them out of the ground. Let's go ahead and get the onions freed out. I've got a milk crate here I'm going to put them in, and then we'll move on with some closer shots of what we're looking for in the necks and putting them on the drying rack. Harvesting is very easy, especially whenever they've been out here drying for a little bit extra time. They come out with just a light pull. They're already pretty loose. It's just the roots at the bottom that anchor them, and that's the only thing that really needs to contact the soil. As I mentioned before, I was going to share a practice with you that helps, I think, get a bigger onion bulb. And that's whenever it's growing, just using your fingers and digging out around the shoulders of the onion, exposing about the top half of the bulb. That relieves pressure and lets that bulb get a little bit bigger. Let's go ahead and start popping these out of the ground. Just a simple pull. Brush off any of the big dirt, and then we'll get them in our crate. Let's go ahead and work on the rest. All right, there we have it. A milk crate full of fresh picked onions. I'm pretty happy with the yield. We've got pretty nice sizes on most of those. So now let's move over and I'll talk about the curing process. I start my curing process here under the deck. And in past years, I've laid them out on these old scrap leftover fence pieces. This year I had some lumber left over from a project and some chicken wire. So I built this frame, and we're gonna lay the onions out on it and then move it under the the deck and put it across the sawhorses. I have some garlic here. We're going to do the same thing, lay it out here on the rack. Why do we need to cure onions? If you plan to use them right away, you don't. I used a couple in dinner last night. I came out to the garden, pulled them out of the ground, took them inside, rinsed them off, and we had them with some tacos. If you plan to store them long term, then this is critical. If there's any moisture left in the neck and in those first outer layers, you're opening yourself up to mold and rot. The length of time needed to cure an onion is really variable depending on your environment. If you live in a cooler, more humid area, it's going to take a little bit longer. For us, we're humid but very hot. I'm sweating like crazy right now. Humidity is through the roof, and it's not even 90 degrees yet. So let's just talk about the characteristics of when an onion is done curing. I'll show you here with this red onion, and I'll come closer to the camera. So with this smaller red onion, we're already pretty good in the curing process. As you can see, it's withered all the way down, and the next section is very, very dry. So this onion right here may come in from curing much sooner. Now let me show you one that needs a little bit more time on the curing rack. So this red, you can still see, has some green in the stalk. That's got to be completely withered like these, dry, ready to crumble away. And the neck is still very firm, very thick. Got a couple layers of paper, but we need the top 3 to 5 layers to be papery. So this one needs more time on the curing rack. And as I lay them out, I'll put the ones that need more time in one area, and the ones that might just need a few days or a week in a different area, so I can recover those a little sooner. As we lay them out, we want them to be in a single layer and not touching if possible. And like I said, I'm going to put them in 2 different areas. These ones back here, ones that need less time, the ones up front need a little extra. So this one's got a lot of green left, so it's going to need much more time. Again, a lot of green, more time. These 2. So I said that we want the single layer, but we have all these greens. So on the next layer, we kind of lay it between the greens. And as we go, you can set one of the onions on top of greens, especially the drier greens. And throughout the curing process, it might take up to 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how green it is. This one here looks like it's going to take quite a bit of time. This one, very, very thin neck, still a little wet in the greens. So much less time for those up there. Let me get these laid out and I'll show you the final result. Okay, we have the onions laid out here on the screen in roughly a single layer. It didn't take up all of the rack, but we're gonna put the garlic on the rack also. It is the same process for garlic. You want that same papery outside and dry greens. It's important for the single layer and a rack like this for airflow. Airflow is important. Up off the ground, here across the sawhorses for us, and out of the elements. Here under the deck, it won't get direct sunlight, but if we get rain, then we'll have to move them inside. We did this practice last year. We had rain in the forecast. We just moved the rack. 2 people pick it up, move it around, set it in the garage. Works just fine. And even the last week in the garage, last year was fine. Our garage stays at a normal temperature and we get good airflow. If you have a covered porch or a barn that gets good airflow and stays at a nominal temperature, that's the ideal. But here we have to use what we got. We're gonna get these moved on top of the sawhorses and get the curing process started. We'll wait some time and then we'll jump forward in the video when the curing process is done, and we'll show you how we store them. Welcome back. It's been 3 weeks since we put our onions to cure under the deck. This will be our first full recording under the deck. A lot's happened in 3 weeks. The first day that we put the onions under the deck, it rained. So as soon as we put them under here, we had to move them to the garage. And they've been in and out of the garage, depending on the weather, for the past 3 weeks. Now, we haven't received any rain since that day, coincidentally. It's still quite hot. I'm trying not to sweat to death on camera. But we've had some extremely hot days where we would move them in and out of the garage. So when it's very, very hot, we had upwards of 100 degrees. We didn't want them being out and having roasted onions. So we would move them into the garage, out of the garage, based on the outdoor temperature. And while they were in the garage, during the daytime, I would have a fan blowing just to keep that air circulation going. But here we are at 3 weeks, and let me show you where we're at. So here you can see what we were talking about, and I'll get up close where the neck is quite thin, it's pliable, it feels dry, crunchy. These are perfect. We've got nice paper. A lot of the papers have fallen off just from the drying process. There's paper here. We've got all of our garlic in the back. It's ready to hang. And here, let's get a white. The whites are really, really thin and dry. These are great. You can see a lot of the tops have come off of these. Bugs. So there's fewer onions on the rack because over the past 3 weeks, we've been using them right out of the garage. We've done some canning. I made some bread and butter pickles that needed onions, and just everyday meals that required onions and garlic, we just got it straight out of the garage. So now it's time to get these in and stored for the next several months as we use them. Let me show you what these look like up close. You can see that the top is bent over. It's extremely thin and dry. This is exactly what we're looking for. Now I'll show you the method of how I bag and store them. And I have a couple of examples here. Some are old methods and some are something new I'm going to try. So the old tried and true, using the bags that onions come in from the supermarket. I make sure I put my hole at the top. I can fill this with onions and I can hang it in the garage. Same thing here. This one's completely open at the top, but I can put a zip tie around that or tie a little knot and hang this in the garage. Something new that I'm going to try, I got these guys on Amazon. It's a nice bag with a handle. You fill the onions and it's got a little access slit on the side that's Velcro where you can reach in and get your onions or garlic or whatever you hang in here pretty easily. It came with a pack of 5. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in picking these up. I think these are going to work well. And, you know, a sexy method. Some very cheap, from Amazon also, fishnet stockings. Probably won't use these today. I guess my light came unplugged, but if we're too dark, I apologize. So we're probably not going to use these today, but this is an example of something that you could use. So using one of these onions, all we're going to do is take a pair of shears. These are just utility scissors, and cut off the dry tops. And I'm going to work on putting, you know, all the like kinds together. So I'll put several yellows. In one bag. Keep them. This one still feels a little wet and soft. So I'm going to set this one aside. It'll be the first one used. Very dry. You can hear it crinkly. All of the onions that we've eaten so far have been true to the taste profile of the yellows, the reds, and the whites. Sometimes an onion can be really strong. So there's 6 yellow onions. I'm gonna pick up my commercial reusable bag here and just drop them in one at a time. Ugh. Avoid doing that. That's not good for them. Don't damage them. I'm horrible. So there's 6, and it looks like we could probably do 2, 4 more in that bag. I really like that. So once I have all of these bagged up, what I'll do down in the basement, it's the best place I have to store. It's where my potatoes are. I have nails on the rafters, much like here under the deck. I don't know if you can see the rafters, but you know what a rafter looks like. I just have nails put in, and they'll hang just like this from the rafters. Space them out, and when you need them, you just go in and pull them out as you need them. I'm gonna go ahead and trim up the rest and get them bagged. This one here that I just dropped, it's pretty unique. It's 2 that kind of formed together. I'm gonna set that one aside to use it soon also, because it didn't form papers all around the exposed. We'll use that one soon. Whew. Just this little bit of easy work has already got me sweating a little bit. We don't have very many white onions left because we have made several rounds of salsa verde from the tomatillos and garlic from the garden. We have a lot of tomatillos, and we have been enjoying some salsa verde. So there's only 6, 7 with the one that we set aside of white onions left. So, you know, white onions go good with Mexican food. There you have it. The garlic, this is hard neck garlic, so it has a very rigid stem. I normally just kind of strip off any of the extra tops that'll come off just by hand. And then I'll just bundle these 8 or 10 together and tie a piece of string. Also hang that from the rafters downstairs and use it as I needed. You don't have to leave the stems on. You can trim those off, bag the bulbs, hang them in the basement, hang them in your cellar, whatever you need. They'll store just fine. This brings us to the end of the harvesting, curing, and storing onions episode. Hopefully it helps you preserve your onions for months to come. It's a lot of hard work growing the onions in your garden. When it comes time to storing them, you want them to last throughout the months until you've used them completely, and you don't have to throw them out because they've rotted or molded. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. If you've liked it, hit that like button. If you want to see more episodes, be sure to subscribe. And if you want notifications when we release something new, click the bell icon to get those notifications. This brings us to the end of another sweaty summer episode. Remember, keep on working toward a better Terra, one layer at a time.